A squirrel on a trail can look ridiculous until you realize it is making a very old calculation. You step into the woods with a granola bar in your hand. Birds burst from a cedar like shrapnel. A deer locks onto you for half a second, ears forward, body still, then vanishes between the trees. The squirrel does its broken little rhythm. 3 steps. Freeze. 3 steps. Freeze. As if your hiking boots have introduced a theological crisis. From your point of view, nothing has happened. You are soft, slow, unarmed, slightly tired, and probably carrying a water bottle with stickers on it that says, "Let's save the planet." From the animal's point of view, a human-shaped object has entered the map, and the safest assumption is that the map has become dangerous. The strange part is that many animals are not merely cautious around humans. They are more afraid of us than they are of other predators. Not because we are the fastest, strongest, or best camouflaged animal on Earth, but because we became something harder to read, a predator with no reliable pattern. The first useful idea is called the landscape of fear. Ecologists use it to describe the invisible geography created by danger. A rabbit does not wait until a fox is touching it to react. A deer does not only think about wolves when a wolf is already running. Animals organize their lives around possible death, where they graze, when they drink, which valley they cross, which thicket they sleep in, how long they keep their head down before looking up again. For a very long time, humans were part of that calculation. Before rifles, before farms, before cities, early humans hunted. We were not impressive in the way a lion is impressive. We had no claws worth mentioning, no killing bite, no antlers, no venom. What we had was endurance, cooperation, memory, throwing arms, tools, and the unsettling ability to keep coming back. Persistence hunting, practiced by some human groups, relied on following an animal during the heat of the day until it overheated or collapsed. If you were an antelope on an open plain and a biped appeared in the distance, jogging at a calm, moderate pace, the frightening thing was not speed. The frightening thing was that it did not stop. Natural selection did the rest. Animals that ignored human silhouettes were more likely to die. Animals that fled survived more often, reproduced more often, and left behind offspring with stronger avoidance responses. Over thousands of generations, fear did not need to be taught every time from scratch. It became part of the inherited survival software. Notice the upright ape, reduce risk, leave early. Then researchers started measuring something that made the picture even darker. In 2016, researchers from the University of Western Ontario argued that humans function as a super predator. The phrase sounds flattering until you understand what it means. They were not saying humans are noble hunters at the top of a clean food chain. They were saying that animals often treat human presence as a more serious threat than the presence of other carnivores. In one set of field experiments, scientists played recordings near wildlife. Predator sounds, environmental sounds, and ordinary human voices. Not shouting, not gunfire, just people talking, the kind of harmless conversation you might hear outside a shop. The reaction was severe. Mountain lions abandoned feeding sites at more than twice the rate they did when hearing other predators. Bobcats, deer, skunks, opossums, and other mammals also reduced activity or fled more strongly when human voices entered the soundscape. That detail matters. A mountain lion is not a nervous little creature at the bottom of the food web. It is an ambush predator with claws, muscle, night vision, and the ability to kill animals larger than a person. Yet the sound of casual human speech can make it give up food. Somewhere inside that response is a long history of being trapped, shot, poisoned, chased from habitat, and killed for coming too close to livestock or settlements. Most predators are dangerous in understandable ways. Wolves tend to hunt certain prey at certain times, across certain terrain. Crocodiles wait near water. Hawks scan open ground. Snakes strike at close range. Prey species evolve around those patterns. A fish can stay deeper when waiting birds feed. A deer can avoid a clearing at dusk. A ground squirrel can stay close to a burrow when a hawk's shadow crosses the grass. Humans break that logic. We hunt in daylight and darkness, alone and in groups, quietly and with engines. We use dogs, traps, bows, rifles, boats, helicopters, cameras, drones, fences, roads, fire, bait, and laws written on paper that still change whether an animal lives or dies. We kill animals for meat, safety, sport, trade, research, pest control, trophies, conservation, and sometimes by accident with a windshield. To an animal brain built around pattern recognition, this is not a normal predator category. It is a moving exception. Predator recognition is one of the basic skills of survival. Many animals can sort threats into rough types: canine, big cat, raptor, snake, lion. Each category can trigger a different response. Freeze under cover, run uphill, dive underwater, mob the threat as a group, stay silent. But humans are difficult to classify because we arrive with mixed signals. We smell like soap, smoke, plastic, sweat, cooked food, gasoline, metal, detergent, and whatever was in the last room we walked through. We move upright, but not like a heron. We look forward like a predator, but sometimes we scatter seed for pigeons and take photographs of ducks. That is why a city pigeon can seem like it missed the memo. Habituation is the process by which an animal reduces its response to a repeated stimulus that does not harm it. If a pigeon sees humans every day, and the usual result is crumbs, dropped fries, warm pavement, fountain water, and no pursuit, then panic becomes expensive. Fear costs energy, it interrupts feeding, it burns daylight. In a city square, the bird that flees from every passerby may do worse than the bird that calmly steps aside at the last second. Raccoons, gulls, rats, foxes, macaques, coyotes, and crows all show versions of this adjustment. They do not become tame in a moral sense. They update their model. Certain humans, in certain places, at certain distances, are low risk and high opportunity. A gull stealing a chip from someone's hand is not brave in the human meaning of the word. It has learned that our reactions are slow, our food is exposed, and our outrage is usually harmless. Crows take this further. Studies have shown that crows can recognize individual human faces, remember people associated with danger, and pass that information socially. In experiments using masks, crows scolded and harassed the dangerous face years after the original capture event, and other crows joined in despite not being captured themselves. That is not simple fear. That is surveillance, memory, teaching, and local culture aimed directly at humans. The strongest proof that fear of humans is not automatic comes from places where animals never had to learn it. When Charles Darwin visited the Galapagos Islands in the 1830s, he was amazed by how little the animals reacted to people. Birds did not immediately fly away. Marine iguanas could be approached closely. Giant tortoises moved through a world where humans had not yet become a familiar threat. Similar scenes have been described in parts of Antarctica, where penguins approach researchers, inspect equipment, tug at straps, and treat a human camp less like a danger zone than a confusing rock formation full of interesting objects. Remote islands produced some of the most tragic examples. The dodo of Mauritius became famous for its fearlessness, and sailors interpreted that fearlessness as stupidity. It was not stupidity. It was evolutionary innocence. In a habitat without large mammalian predators and without a history of human hunting, walking away from a person had never been necessary. By the time the lesson arrived, it arrived with sailors, invasive animals, habitat destruction, and extinction. Marine reserves show the same principle in a modern, measurable way. In areas protected from fishing for long periods, fish often become less wary of divers. In nearby unprotected waters, similar species flee sooner and keep greater distance. The animal is not judging humanity as an abstract concept. It is responding to local evidence. In this reef, divers do not spear you. In that reef, they might. The fear can dissolve. That is the important part. It can fade within generations, and sometimes within individual lifetimes, when humans stop acting like a direct threat. But fear is not just an emotion inside one animal. It can rearrange entire ecosystems. Yellowstone National Park became the classic example after wolves were reintroduced in 1995. The wolves killed elk, but their larger influence came through behavior. Elk began avoiding exposed valleys and spending less time browsing along certain riverbanks. With less constant grazing pressure, young willows, aspens, and cottonwoods recovered in some areas. More vegetation stabilized stream banks, shaded water, helped insects and birds, and changed habitat for beavers and fish. The exact story is complex and still debated in its details, but the central lesson survived. Fear itself can be ecological. Predators shape the land not only by eating bodies, but by changing decisions. Humans create a planetary version of this effect. Wildlife cameras have shown mammals shifting their activity into the night in response to human disturbance. A 2018 study in Science examined data across 6 continents and found that mammals became significantly more nocturnal when living around people. The shift happened not only where animals were being hunted, but also where humans were hiking, farming, building, driving, logging, or simply present often enough to be noticed. This means our footprint is not limited to the places we pave. A trail, a road, a campground, a farm edge, a ski slope, a beach at sunset, a river full of kayaks, a forest with weekend hikers. All of these can change when animals feed, mate, migrate, rest, and move their young. The animal may still exist in the area, but its day has been bent around our schedule. Even our scent can do it. To us, human odor is mostly a social inconvenience. To wild animals, scent is a map of danger. Many species read the world through chemical traces: urine, musk, blood, sweat, glands, rot, soil, crushed plants, old tracks, fresh tracks, predator markings. Wildlife managers sometimes use predator urine to discourage animals from entering certain places because scent can signal risk without the predator being visible. Human scent can produce similar avoidance. Experiments using human odor near camera traps have found reduced wildlife activity, sometimes comparable to responses caused by large carnivore scent. That makes sense when you consider what we carry into the woods: skin oils, breath, clothing fibers, sunscreen, insect repellent, shampoo, deodorant, laundry detergent, fuel, food residue, and the synthetic chemical signature of indoor life. We do not smell neutral. We smell like an entire civilization passing through. This is also why attacks are often misunderstood. When an animal injures a human, the story is usually framed as aggression, but most encounters are defensive. The animal is cornered, surprised, guarding young, protecting food, injured, trapped near human development, or forced into contact because habitat has been reduced. A bear that stands its ground on a trail is often trying to create space, not start a war. A moose with a calf, a wild boar in thick brush, a bison crowded by tourists, a snake stepped on beside a path. The pattern is rarely animal wants human. More often it is animal has run out of safe options. There are exceptions. Polar bears are one of the few large predators that may actively hunt humans. Their world explains part of that. In the Arctic, food is scarce, energy is precious, and for much of their evolutionary history, there were few reasons to treat upright mammals as a special danger. A starving polar bear does not need a cultural memory of humans to investigate a possible meal. Still, across most species, avoidance is the default. That avoidance has a hidden consequence for us. It makes wildlife disappear before we ever arrive. A forest can feel peaceful because it is quiet, but quiet is not always peace. Sometimes it is evacuation. Animals hear us before we see them. They smell us before we reach the bend in the trail. They step behind cover, go still, climb higher, dive deeper, leave the meadow, delay feeding, or wait until darkness. Then we walk through and say the woods are empty or balanced or untouched, because the fear we caused has already cleaned the stage. This creates a cruel conservation problem. The animals most harmed by humans are often the hardest for humans to study and protect. Heavily hunted populations become more nocturnal, more evasive, more sensitive to vehicles and voices. Researchers trying to count them may underestimate them. Rangers trying to protect them may struggle to approach. Rescue, monitoring, vaccination, anti-poaching work, and habitat management all become harder when fear has built a wall between the species that needs help and the species capable of giving it. Yet the wall is not permanent. Mountain gorilla conservation in Rwanda and Uganda has shown how careful habituation can work when it is slow, consistent, and respectful. Some gorilla groups that once fled from people eventually learned to tolerate the presence of trained trackers, veterinarians, researchers, and small tourist groups. The point was not to erase wildness. It was to create a narrow category in the gorillas' minds. These humans, at this distance, behaving this way, have not harmed us. That trust became valuable. It allowed health monitoring, snare removal, veterinary care, and tourism revenue that helped make living gorillas worth more than dead habitat. Protected areas show similar recoveries. When hunting pressure drops and human disturbance becomes predictable, animals often reclaim daylight. They graze in open areas again. Fish approach divers. Birds nest closer to trails where people stay on paths. Mammals reduce the constant vigilance that comes with living under threat. The landscape of fear can be dismantled, but only when our behavior is reliable enough for other species to believe it. That is the uncomfortable truth inside the fleeing deer and the frantic squirrel. Their fear is not irrational. It is historically informed. Humans have driven species extinct, collapsed populations, invaded islands, drained wetlands, cut forests, lit fires, laid roads, warmed the climate, moved predators and diseases across oceans, and changed the rules of survival on every continent. Any animal that treats us as dangerous is making a statistically sound decision, but the same mind that made us frightening also gives us the rare ability to change what we mean. A wolf cannot decide to become a conservationist. A shark cannot redesign a fishery. A hawk cannot create a protected corridor, regulate hunting, restore wetlands, remove snares, slow traffic, or leave breeding beaches alone for a season. Humans can. So the squirrel is not being dramatic. It is running an ancient program in a modern park, unable to know that you only came to eat a granola bar and look at trees. It sees the outline of the animal that keeps changing the world. The hopeful part is that fear is a record of behavior, not a law of nature. In places where humans become predictable, restrained, and harmless for long enough, animals begin to act differently. They step back into daylight. They feed without constant panic. They raise young in the open. They stop spending so much of life paying the tax of vigilance. The version of Earth where every creature flees at the sound of our voice is not the only possible version. It is the version we earned. Whether it remains the version we leave behind is still being decided every time we enter the woods.